Welcome to the SaaS Revolution Show, a podcast by SaaStock. Here we interview SaaS founders from around the world who've been there and done that, as they share the ins and outs of how they built their businesses, their operations, their path to securing investment, and more. Our mission with the podcast is to help you, the founder, learn how to scale your SaaS, maintain your well-being, and navigate the complexities of this ever-changing industry. I'm your host, Alex Theuma, and together we'll explore the good, the bad, and the ugly in the journey to SaaS success.
Hi, Alex Theuma here, live at SaaStock USA 2025, and I'm joined by Savneet Singh, CEO of PAR, where we're doing a live episode of the SaaS Revolution Show. Welcome, Savneet. Welcome to SaaStock.
Thank you for having me.
It's not your first time in Austin, right? I'm
No,
not sure.
no, we have an office here.
You've got an office here. And what thoughts about, well, given you've got an office here, the city itself as a tech hub, like fast-growing tech hub, like what are your thoughts around Austin?
Yeah, I think it's Austin's had this incredible growth, and we've participated in it to a small degree. I think it's got that perfect combination of great food, enough companies here to create an ecosystem.
Yep.
And then, it has all the challenges of every other city with too much traffic and housing getting pushed out, miles and miles. But I think it's a great hub. I also think geographically it's easier to get to from East Coast. And so I think that helps it a lot as becoming broader Texas being you see more and more HQs built out here, I think.
And outside of being a CEO of the public company, who is Savneet Singh?
I'm I'm a dad of 3 little kids, so very busy with them. I'm a huge sports fan, and I truly, truly love to eat.
Yep. Okay, sports. What sort of sports? Like all sorts?
So I am an obsessive sports follower. So I love American football,
Yep.
basketball, and baseball. And then I was a really big tennis player growing up. So I love athletics. So I'm on a basketball team. I try to help my kids out in sports. So just kind of anything and everything that we're kind of competitive.
And I guess not just watching sports, but participating in all the sports helps with that. The other hobby of yours, which is, I think you said eating or food.
Yes, it does. I mean, for me, I think that it's, when you've got kids and you've got a busy job, it is so hard to pull your mind completely out of anything. And for me, I struggle a little bit with things like meditation. My mind's just too wild. But if I'm, on playing a basketball game where, you're running and people are yelling at you, like, it's like one of the few things where I'm like, for a short period of time, like there's nothing but one other thing on my mind. And I think that's really valuable.
Yeah. I find for me as well, like, I'm not very consistent with meditation, and I want to do better because I think like many entrepreneurs, CEOs probably suffer from quite like cortisol, and occasionally you get those crashes and you don't feel great when you do. And obviously meditation is supposed to kind of help with this, right? But for me personally, I find like cooking, for instance, like I just never think about work when I'm cooking. And therefore, on the weekends, I like to cook quite a lot. So that's something how I deal with that, right? And so you've been here today. You've just spoken on the stage with AJ in I think some of the lessons, the scaling PAR. What he shared at the beginning. So PAR, I think it's over 400 million in revenue, right? And it's a public company. I believe you were on the board. You've been an entrepreneur before. You were on the board. Then you became the CEO. But you became the CEO at the time when the company was nearly dying. It was like running out of cash. Had a couple of weeks to live. Can you share a little bit about maybe how you felt stepping in, or why stepping in at that time? Is that like quite a risk for you? You're like, I'm going to become the CEO, but we could go out of business in 2 weeks. Like, how many people would take that bet, right?
Yeah. So I had been on the board, for 6, 7, 8 months before I became the CEO, and early in my journey on the board, I had started being like, man, this is. I don't know if this is fixable.
Yeah.
And so I started nudging for a sale, and, the board at the time was not interested in that. I said, hey, let's find a new CEO. And then in trying to find a new CEO, we realized we couldn't find a CEO that wanted to take the job or one that we thought capable of taking the job. And so then we moved to try to sell the business. And I think in the journey of selling the business, we realized that the team we had at the time, we would not be able to sell the business. It was, it just wasn't going well. And so I thought I was coming in, almost like a part-time job. I'll come in, I'll manage the bankers. I'd, spend a little bit of my career as a banker, and we'd get the company sold. I didn't know we were running out of money. So, the true story that happened was literally on my first day in the office, our CFO comes in and says, hey, we're meeting with the auditors. We've got like 8, 9, maybe 10 weeks of cash left. Is that enough time to sell the company? And it was like one of those, oh my gosh moments, which was, it's a public company with a lot of, issues. there's no way we're can sell this company in that period of time. And so, I think my entrepreneurial, energy just sort of like triggered, and it was like, okay, how do we solve this? Because I really didn't want to be the CEO of a bankrupt company. And
so you had a very short window. It could have been a very short tenure as CEO, right? But it hasn't been. How did you solve it? Like, I mean, I'm sure there were many things, but what were some of the key things that you had to do to ensure that you were still around in 10 weeks' time?
So listen, I think it's no different than any other problem, which is I think if you can set the right goal, bring the right people around the table, catalyze the right energy and focus, any problem is solvable, in my opinion. And we did that. I remember Brian, who's still our CFO today, I said, like, let's get everybody in the room tonight, and we need a cost savings plan that we can enact within 10 days.
Yep.
And at the same time, I need a meeting with these lenders to give us an extension, and we're going to convince the lenders on this extension because we're going to make these cost cuts, and so they can underwrite that as a way for us to finance those costs, extend the financing.
Yeah.
And then we just started getting to work.
Yep.
I don't think we had the perfect plan, but I think it was a lot about just a ton of focus.
Yeah.
Which is our goal is to convince lenders to give us a little more time.
Yeah.
And get the business profitable as we can in a very short period of time, and remove every distraction, which was sell non-core assets, cut out all the parts of the business that really, really didn't need as essential. And it was painful. I mean, we had to lay off 25% of the workforce within 10 days.
Yep.
And, that's a tough thing to do.
Yeah.
Because many of those people have been there for decades. And so it's a horrendous thing to do. But in many ways, and I hate saying this because people's lives were impacted, but it was one of the best things we did because it set the culture of the company.
Yeah.
I remember the day we did it, the prior head of HR said, hey, I talked to the board, like, don't come to the office. And I said, like, what do you mean? It's my decision to make this decision. And she's like, well, you kind of look a little bit different than everybody else. You're a lot younger than everybody else. Like, this might not go over well. And, my comments are like, listen, if I'm going to, treat people like kids, they're going to act like kids. If I treat my partners, will act like partners. And so I show up to the office and we make this change. And when we, I do a town hall at the end of the day, and back then everybody was in the office, and said, hey, like, we just disrupted the lives of 120 people, whatever the number was at the time. And they'll never forget that. They'll be insecure for the rest of their lives because today we made them all feel like they were not good enough.
Yep.
That's something you never get over.
Yep.
And I know what that's like. I know it's like in our household that's had financial insecurity. Like, we have really scarred a set of individuals. And the responsibility of that falls on only me and those sitting in the front row that get paid these really high salaries that did not make a business that succeed them. And all the blame goes to those folks and me.
Yeah.
And not those people that were fired. And in doing that, it was funny. I hadn't planned the speech or anything, but it ended up setting the tone for the rest of the company, which is like, okay, leadership's going to take accountability for their errors and their mistakes. And then I remember, I went through all the cost cuts, the amount of money we saved, how we're going to save the company, and it was transparent to the entire company.
Yep.
And I remember I got off stage and I got like a semi-standing ovation. And I remember calling my wife after and being like, man, that was weird. We just fired all these people and I got like a semi-standing ovation. Like, I might be able to do something here. Like, that's the kind of culture of resiliency that we can do something with.
Nice. And so what year was it then? Let's say the turnaround was like complete, and then you could focus then on growth.
I don't know. I mean, I think you're kind of always balancing the two. I mean, the hardest part for us was we got through that piece. We raised a bunch of money to go invest.
Yeah.
We then had to rebuild our product. I mean, the core challenge, and I still say one of the hardest things I've ever done, is rebuild an enterprise software product that's installed in thousands of stores.
Yeah.
And while still growing it and making sure the base is alive. That was a full, 2-year journey.
Okay.
And I think, but during that journey, we had to still keep our customers happy. We still did an acquisition or two. And so, I think it was really, 2.5 years into the journey where I was like, all right, like, we are now 100% on offense.
And from that point then, in terms of like, okay, you're public, you've got pretty good revenue, but obviously then, each quarter we've got to meet certain targets and grow. So the strategy for you to do this, I guess kind of like since that point, maybe what are some of the things that you've kind of brought in as you could relax a little bit from, we're through the turnaround part and now just fully focus on scaling this public company. What can you share about like strategic focus for you to be able to do that?
I mean, listen, I don't think we've ever relaxed. Since I say to a lot of my friends, I'm like, when we took over the company and we were a $250 million market cap, if you had told me that when we were a $2.5 or $3 billion market cap, that I would be working harder and be more stressed then, I would have never believed you. I'd been like, what do you mean? I'm going to have a team do everything. I'm going to go fly around. It's going to be great. And it's, so I don't think there's ever a moment of relaxation because as you get bigger, the expectations get bigger.
Yeah.
The talent you hire gets better, so they demand more from you.
Yeah.
And the obviously investors want more and more. And so I think we've never taken our foot off the pedal in that sort of intensity to win. it's hard to answer your question. It's sort of like, when did it, strategically what we did. I think what we built at PAR was an incredibly ambitious culture that has been self-reinforcing for years and years now. And what I mean by that is that ambition is about how do we solve our customer problems? How do we solve them faster and better than our peers? At the same time, how do we build a business that we can be proud of, that our investors will want to get behind? And then where do we want to take this thing down the road? And so, we started out doing restaurant point of sale. Today we have point of sale plus 5 other products. We started out just in restaurants. Now we're in a convenience store. And so I think, to answer your question, we are, every year we start the year with 5 goals. We obsess over those 5 goals. We're comped on those 5 goals. Those goals change every year. But naturally, what drives the success of those goals is this intense ambition underneath the people at PAR and reinforcing that culture. So, my job is to make sure we don't lose that edge.
Well, I guess then on the culture point, and you mentioned on the stage, you changed the values. You felt like the values that you had were perhaps not the values that you needed as the business. Can you share a little bit about what they were, why you changed them, and how this has impacted the culture?
Yeah. So, I remember the values, and I don't remember all of them, but, it was stuff like caring, empathy. And these are not bad values, and by the way, I don't think any value is ever bad. They are, but they were not relevant. And I was like, what do you mean caring? We're going to go business, I got a business and all these 1,000 people are going to lose their jobs or whatever, how many people are that's not caring. In reality, a business has to win in order to take care of its people, take care of its community, take care of its shareholders. And so to me, I'm like, we're robbing our shareholders by not telling the truth that we might go to business. We're lying to our employees who don't realize they're going to be out of a job in the next amount of time. And so the reason we changed the values was that they weren't real. And, because, you can have a value like caring. But to me, caring is am I a caring father can be a father that spoils his child versus a father that pushes their child to be successful, has tough conversations, is comfortable being uncomfortable. To me, a CEO is no different in the sense of if you care, you're going to build a sustainable business that can take care of that team, take care of your community, take care of your customers, take care of your shareholders. And so our values went from these sort of light, fluffy words to really tough ones. And the whole point, and the advice I always give to companies is you want your values to scare as many people as they attract, or even more. And the point being is if you go to most companies' values, try to find a company's values who you disagree with. 9 out of 10, you're going to be like, yep, I'll fit there. I'll fit there. I'll fit there. And I wanted the opposite. I want to be like, that sounds intense. I don't want that. And so we made ours speed, ownership, and winning. So it's very clear what our goal was. We wanted to win. We wanted to be fast. We wanted people that would be owners, not renters of our company. And so that was a great filtering mechanism to scare people away and attract those that really wanted to climb that mountain with us.
How are you thinking about AI and the culture of the business with AI? So I'd be curious to see maybe how you're personally using AI as a CEO, and then within the business, maybe some of the communication to the team about.
So I think, AI is obviously all the buzzwords, blah, blah, blah. I think for a CEO, your job is actually to create a focus on what you want to do with AI. I think the worst thing you can do as a CEO is just keep talking about AI being important, because in the end, nobody in your company knows what to do with it. And budgets aren't set up for it. And it's oh, I want to do it, but I need an extra X amount of money to buy licenses and so on and so forth. And so my job, I believe, in creating AI at PAR is to say, here's what we want to deliver with AI. And so PAR, we've said 2 things. We want to create AI tooling for business efficiency. So if you can find AI to create a business use case that makes us faster, cheaper, or deliver a better customer experience, we want to hear about it. We want to fund it. We want to support it. Our second one is AI as it relates to the user experience of our products. And so the company knows exactly what we want to accomplish now, as opposed to if I did this thing, I can rewrite all the code at PAR. That's not what we're trying to do. And so I think the job of a CEO in today's world with AI is lay out the actual goals that you want from it. And those can change over time, but create a forcing mechanism of how you want, because otherwise AI is just too broad. It's too applicable to everything. And so narrowing that focus, I think, is important. And the last thing, and this is sort of my advice, it could be totally wrong here, but I see all these companies creating the AI czar role, the head of AI, and I generally find that to be the innovation labs of companies that never they sort of become professors, not doers. And so I think if you want to be in the AI world, that expense, if you want to go invest in those tooling, needs to be owned by the department in the line of business. Yeah. And so that they're actually saying, hey, I'm making this investment in my P&L or my HR department because I believe it's actually going to deliver my goals better versus the AI team has got this.
Final question, Savneet. What's the hardest thing about being a CEO?
I think and it sounds silly saying this, but it's sacrifice. I mean, what I mean by that is if you want to be a successful CEO, and maybe it's my own ineptness, but you kind of sacrifice a lot of other stuff. You sacrifice an immense amount of time with those that you love and care about. You sacrifice your health. I'm on a plane 50% of the year. You sacrifice other joys that your friends have. And so I think that you got to be all in if you want to be the best. And it sounds kind of silly, but I think a lot of CEOs relate to athletes in a funny way. And I always think it's so funny because I think athletes are so much more impressive than CEOs. But when I read a biography of a great athlete, they're sometimes I'm oh my God, that's exactly what I feel. But they've been so eloquent in delivering that. So I do think there is a sacrifice because there are very few large, in this example, software companies in the world. And if you want to be the person that builds one of those companies, there's no doubt you have to sacrifice something to do that. There's not a balance. And I think this idea that you can have it all is key to like being really, really average. So to me, it's a sacrifice.
100%. Well, Savneet, thanks so much for joining us at SaaStock USA and also being a live guest for the SaaS Revolution show. Really appreciate it.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Thank you.